Hey there, everybody. Welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution. My name is Leilani. It is Tuesday night, and that means it is book club. We are live here on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all the places. And make sure you share, comment, like, subscribe, do all the things so that people can find this channel and get the help and or services that they need. And so here we go tonight. Let me grab the share key. Hold on. So tonight we are still moving forward with our book Nosso by medium Chico Xavier. We are on chapter 46. And I'm excited to get this started. If I can just get to boom. All right, y'all. Those of you in the comments section, let me know if you can see the screen. Do you guys see chapter 46 on your screen? Let me know. Nice. Okay. So, the title of this chapter is A Woman's Sacrifice. A Woman's Sacrifice. Let's get into it. A year had passed in constructive work, which had been a great solace to my heart. As I gradually learned how to make myself useful and find pleasure in serving, I became more confident and more happy. Although I yearned to return to my earthly home, I had not yet been given the opportunity. When on several occasions I had meant to ask permission, something seemed to hold me back. I had not received the kindest help from everyone? Wasn't I surrounded by the friendship and esteem of all of my companions? I recognized that my wish would have been granted if it had been useful to me, and I decided to wait patiently. Although I was working at Regeneration, Laura and Tobias constantly reminded me that Minister Clarence was still the person responsible for my stay in the colony. I often met the generous minister of assistance, but he never mentioned the subject. Clarence never changed his reserved attitude in exercise of the authority inherent in his obligations. Once, during the Christmas festivities in the Ministry of Elevation, probably sensing how deeply I missed my wife and children, he touched lightly on the subject, telling me that the day was not very far when he would accompany me to the old home. Joyous hope had filled my heart. I thanked him emotionally. Still, it is now September 1940, and I still had not seen my dream realized. The knowledge that I had spent my time in useful service in the chambers did comfort me. Our work went on interruptedly, and I worked tirelessly. I had become familiar with nursing in the different wards and had learned how to read patients' thoughts. I kept in touch with poor Alicia, tried my best to assist her indirectly through her struggle for spiritual recovery. But as I gradually reached emotional balance, the desire to visit my loved ones became more and more intense. My homesickness hurt me deeply. The one solace I did have were my mother's occasional visits. Although she lived in a higher sphere, she never abandoned me to my fate. The last time we had met, she had had some new plans in mind, which she would soon tell me. Her attitude of resignation had deeply impressed me, and I awaited her next visit, anxious to know those plans. At last, in early September of 1940, she came to the chambers, and after her usual loving greetings, she informed me that she intended to return to the physical plane, and in a gentle voice she unfolded her plan. I was surprised and upset by the idea and protested. I really disagree. Why should you return to the flesh? Why begin the weary wandering again without the immediate need to without the immediate need to? And in a dignified serenity, my mother replied, "Have you forgotten your father's afflicting condition, my son? For many years I have worked to lift him up, but all my efforts have been in vain. Laertes has become a skeptic with a poisoned heart. Should he persist in such an attitude, he might be drawn into deeper abysses. What should we do, then? Do you have the heart to see your father in such a condition, and yet refrain from doing everything in your power to help him?" "Of course not," I answered, greatly affected. "I would work hard to help him, but mother, you could find the means of assisting him here." "No doubt I could. However, spirits who really love aren't satisfied with lending a helping hand from a distance. What good are all the riches in the world if we can't share them with our loved one? Would you be content to live in a palace from which your children were excluded?" "No, I can't maintain my distance. Now that I can count on you on this side, I'll join Louisa and help your father find his way to redemption." After a few minutes of deep thought, I insisted, "But mother, are you sure there is no other way to do it?" "Nope, it wouldn't be possible. I have thoroughly examined the subject, and all of my superiors have agreed with my decision. I can't raise the inferior to the superior, but I can do the opposite. There is nothing else I can do, and there mustn't be a minute hesitation on my part. I have in you support for the future. So don't lose your way, my son, and when you are able to go through the spheres that separate us from the earth, give your mother all the assistance in your power. Meanwhile, don't forget your sisters who may still be in the dark zones undergoing active purification. In a very short time, I'll be back in the physical world, where I'll meet Laertes to carry out the task that Father will assign us." "But," I asked, "how are you going to meet him? In spirit?" "No," replied my mother, her face assuming a significant expression. "With the help of some friends, I started preparing his immediate reincarnation, and last week I settled him on Earth. He was never aware of any direct help from us because we availed ourselves of time when he was trying to escape the woman who still subjugated him. This mental attitude was very helpful, and we succeeded in binding him to his new physical body." "Is that possible? What about your individual liberty?" I asked. Mother smiled, rather sadly, and explained, "There are some reincarnations that are carried out rather drastically, and if the patient lacks the courage to accept the sacred but bitter medicine, his friends help him to swallow it down. The soul can't claim unlimited freedom unless it fully understands its duty and performs it. Besides, we must bear in mind that the debtor is a slave to his debts. God created free will, man created fatality. We have to break the chains we ourselves have forged." While I lost myself in deep thought, Mother continued with her observations. "The poor girls who persecuted him won't give up their intent. Were it not for our spirit guides, he might have been deprived of this opportunity for reincarnation." "Good Lord!" I exclaimed. "Can't it be possible? Are we at the mercy of evil forces to that extent? Are we mere puppets in our enemies' hands?" "These questions, my child," declared my mother with great serenity, "should come from our heart and lips before contracting any moral debt and transforming our brothers into adversaries. Never take any loans from iniquity." Woo! You heard that? Oh my goodness, that was a good line. "And what of these women?" I asked. "What will become of them?" They will be my daughters, Mother answered with a smile. And you mustn't forget that I am returning to the world to help your father. No one is able to assist efficiently by intensifying the enemy's forces, just as on Earth you can't extinguish a fire with gasoline. Love is indispensable, Andre. Those who disregard this truth go astray and become wanderers in the desert. Those who err leave the highway and gradually sink into the mire. Your father is now a skeptic, and those unhappy women wading in the mud of ignorance and delusion carry very heavy burdens. And in the near future, I'll gather them in my motherly arms, thus accomplishing my new mission. Her eyes were shining with unashed tears. Gazing at the future horizons, she remarked, and later on, who knows? I may come back to the astral city, bringing along other sacred affections for a great festival of joy, love, and union. Full of awed respect for her sublime abnegation, I knelt down and kissed her hands. And from that moment, my mother was no longer simply my mother to me, but so much more. She was also a messenger of divine goodness, who could transform her most cruel enemies into her children of her heart, in order to give them the opportunity to retrace their steps and start anew as true children of God. Holy crap. So, in a nutshell, what this whole chapter was the mother laying out her plan to not only help her husband, but literally taking on her enemies as her children so that she can mother them in the right direction. That is fucking insane. That is such a beautiful concept, such a wonderful. I honestly, I'm speechless. I don't really know what to say to that other than, like, that person truly hit an elevated state to be able to have that type of humbleness, forgiveness, grace, love, um, to take on this earthly realm with all of its pain, with all of its suffering, with all of the things that, you know, that the world itself pushes on you. Now you want to add the fact that your children were your enemies in your past life, and you chose to birth them into life for the purpose of loving them into goodness, into a higher elevated state, is just that is some saintly shit. You hear me? That is saintly. All right, chapter 47, Laura's return. My mother was not the only one preparing to return to the physical sphere. Laura also found herself confronted with this commitment. I learned that many workers in the colony, especially those in the ministries of assistance and regeneration, were planning a farewell party, which was to be held on the evening when the accounting department presented her with her complete service card. It is impossible to express in ordinary words the spiritual significance of that little party. The family's charming residence, wall music, and lights. Even the flowers seemed more beautiful. Many families had come to salute their friend who was about to depart. Most of the visitors left shortly after, presenting their farewell wishes. Laura's more intimate friends, however, remained until late that night. Thus, I had the opportunity to hear many wise and curious observations. Laura seemed circumspect and grave. I saw that she was making a great effort to join in the general optimism. In the crowded living room, she talked with the accounting department representative. I don't believe I'll be staying for more than 2 days. I have finished my conditioning at the preparation service and at the Ministry of the Elucidation. With a wistful look, she resumed, so as you see, I'm ready. The official, in a fraternal tone, spoke encouragingly. Wonderful to return to the physical world in your circumstances. In a community of over 1 million people, you have thousands and thousands of hours of useful service in your favor. Besides, the children you are leaving here will continue to be your greatest incentive. All that is needed most comforting, she answered, unable to hide her deep concern. Yet we mustn't forget that a reincarnation is always an undertaking of the utmost importance. I know that my husband has preceded me, and my beloved children will be my constant friends. Yet, come now, don't get caught up in the conjecture, Minister Genesius interrupted. We must put up our trust in divine protection and in ourselves. Providence resources are unlimited. We must break the dark glasses through which we see the physical plane as a bitter exile. Don't think of possibilities of weaknesses. Visualize only the probability of successes. Besides, it's only fair for you to count on us, your friends, a little bit. And as far as the vibratory distance is concerned, we won't be far away. Think of the joy of helping old friends and of the sublime glory of being useful. Before we move on, I kind of need you guys to really really look at this sentence here. I think this is something that even all of us who are currently in our reincarnation in one of our lives, I think all of us need to read this and integrate this, because as we look around and we see so much craziness and chaos, and the news is just one bad event after another, genocides all over the world, um you know children being harmed, elderly being harmed, like it it can really turn someone sour. You know what I'm saying? Like, this physical realm has its way of really turning people sour. And so I think it's important for us to take this line and really hold on to this, because just like the previous chapter where his mother was talking, it's all of it is our responsibility. You know what I mean? All of it. If you don't like what you see, change it, right? Laura smiled, and apparently more cheerful, she remarked, I have enlisted the spiritual assistance of my companions so that I may remain mindful of the lessons I have learned here. I realize that the earth is full of divine beauty. It's enough to remember that our sun here is the same one which shines on incarnate people. But, my dear minister, I fear the temporary oblivion that involves us like a dark matter. Although they no longer hurt, the scars remain. The slightest scratch would be enough to make them bleed again. Oof. This is also a very deep paragraph here, right? So she's talking about these scars that are etched into our spirit, right? So this is the stuff that we talk about with regards to soul fragmentation. This is the stuff that we talk about with regards to healers, curanderas, people who assist you in sort of healing these soul scars. And these soul scars come from previous incarnations, past lives. They come from ancestral traumas. They come from a lot of places. And she's acknowledging this. She's fully aware, like, look, I get that the world is beautiful. And I totally get that I have a lot of spiritual support on this side of the veil that will be constantly working in my favor to help me to remember, to help me stay on the straight and narrow as long as I listen, right? She's like, but she's like, there is a more obvious fear, and that is the oblivion. That's that temporary, you know, forgetfulness. That's that temporary peace that disconnects you from those traumas that are in your soul, those scars that are in your soul. This temporary oblivion is what causes you to forget. It's what causes you to not remember how you got those scars in the first place, where they came from. and therefore makes it so much more difficult to heal within yourself. Um, and she even acknowledges that, just living day to day, any little thing, any little person, any little situation could trigger that scar from bleeding out again. It could trigger a trauma from, you know, to resurface. And she's fully aware of that, and that is her fear. And boy, is it a legit one. It's one of those things that I think we all think about, but no one says it out loud. We're so quick to just pick a theory as to what happens to us after we die. Do we go to heaven or hell? Do we reincarnate? Do we do that? But like, no one asks that next question. It's like, okay, once we're in hell or once we're in heaven, then what? Okay, once we reincarnate, then what? You know what I mean? Like, and what spiritism does is it offers not only the aftercare, it gives you the answer to then what, but it also gives you the fears, it gives you the then what's of some of the things that we worry about in these processes. The minister nodded understandingly and resumed. I am not ignoring what the shadows of the lower sphere represent, but we must gather in our courage and go on resolutely. We'll help you to work hard for the good of others rather than for self satisfaction. Remember that the greatest obstacle, now and always, is being caught up in the insidious temptations of selfishness. And this kind of goes into um like when you go to confession, like if you're a Catholic and you go to confession, or when you are, a spiritual person, but you find yourself like really depressed or really down. This little paragraph kind of really does a great job in succinctly saying that one of the best remedies to get out of our own issues is to give to others, to be of charity, to be of work to others. And we also see this in the Allan Kardec books that we read, right? The Spirits book, the Mediums book, the Gospel According to Spiritism, all of that, they repeat over and over and over again how much charity and solidarity is required in this work. Because it's not just, I mean, the 99.999% of the reason, yes, is to help our fellow man. That is the whole reason. But that little itty bitty piece is also to help yourself, to get over your own ego, to get over your own selfish desires, to get over your own passions and things like that, by keeping you humble and by showing you the utmost spiritual reward, and feeling that you receive when you give charity and when you do for others. Here, Laura continued wisely, we can count on the spiritual vibration of most of the colony's inhabitants, who live accordingly to the teaching of the redeeming gospel. Even though our weakness may creep up to the surface, we find our defense in the very atmosphere that surrounds us. On earth, however, our good resolutions are like a flickering flame in an immense sea of aggressive forces. Don't say that, answered the generous minister. You mustn't attach so much importance to the influence of the lower zones. It would be the same as arming the enemy against ourselves. The field of ideas is also a battlefield. Any real constructive light we may kindle on earth will shine forever. For the hurricane of human passions can never blow out a single one of God's lights. Our hostess seemed deeply impressed by the minister's words. She radically changed her mental attitude and spoke cheerfully. I am sure that your visit was providential. I need your exhortation to help me summon all of my energies. You're right. Our mental zone is a constant battlefield. We must chase evil and darkness out of ourselves, dislodging them and not letting them assume the importance they always claim. Yes, I see clearly now. And with a pleased smile, Genesius added, remember that. Within our own individual world, each idea works as if it were a separate entity. When we nourish the elements of good, we work for our own happiness, because they will develop our defenses. On the other hand, when we cultivate any element of evil, we work to construct a secure base for our enemies. As the minister stopped speaking, the accounting department official remarked, we must remember that Laura is returning to the earth endowed with extraordinary spiritual credit. This very morning, the governor's secretary sent a note to the Ministry of Assistance recommending that the reincarnation experts should take the utmost care in dealing with the genetic background selected to shape our sister's new body. Oh, yes, she said. I asked for it so that I might not be too much affected by the laws of heredity. I have been rather concerned about blood. And notice, continued the official, that your merit here is great indeed. The governor himself saw to the measures to be taken in your case. So don't worry, my friend. Genesius exclaimed with a smile, you will be assisted by numerous friends and companions, all working for your welfare. Thank God, Laura exclaimed, comforted. Your words have done me so much good. Now I know I needed to hear you. Lysias and his sisters, now including the kind and generous Teresa, showed their sincere joy at their mother's change in attitude. My mother needs to forget her preoccupations, remarked the devoted medical attendant. After all, we aren't going to stay here and do nothing. You are right, she agreed. I'll cherish hope and will trust in the Lord and in all of you. And for the rest of the evening, the conversation generated confidence and optimism, and the return to earth was discussed with a blessed opportunity to redeem old debts and learn new lessons. And as I took my leave late in the evening, Laura said, I hope to see you again tomorrow evening, Andre. We are holding a little intimate gathering. The Ministry of Communication was promised us a visit from my husband. Although he's already bound by physical ties, he'll be brought here with the aid of some good friends. Furthermore, I'll be saying goodbye to you all. Please be sure to come. I thanked her with emotion and tried hard to keep back the premature tears at the departure of my kind friend. Whew, that was a good one. All right, we're on chapter 48. 48, the home prayer meeting. I'm taking off my glasses because I'm getting a bit of a headache. I apologize. The prescription is really, really strong. Let me take a sip of water. Okay. A spiritist would not be surprised at what I saw in Lysias's home. But to me, it was new and interesting experience. Over 30 people were gathered in the spacious living room. The arrangement of furniture was simple. Comfortable armchair were placed in rows, in 12, in front of a platform where Minister Clarence, who presided over the ceremony, and Laura and her children all sat. About 12 feet away stood a large crystal globe, approximately 6 feet tall. Its lower part was wrapped in wires connecting it to a small apparatus identical to our loudspeakers. Many questions whirled through my mind as I looked around that big room. The visitors had already taken their seats, but I could still hear friendly conversations going on in different groups. I was sitting beside Nicholas, an old worker at assistance, so I thought I might ask him for some information. He willingly complied. We are now ready, just waiting for the order from communications. Our brother Richard is still in his physical childhood, so it won't be difficult for him to leave his material form for a short time. Will he come here? I inquired. Why not? He answered. Not all incarnate men are chained to the earth. Like homing pigeons, which often spend their time flying back and forth between places, there are some incarnate spirits who actually live between two worlds. That, he added, pointing to the equipment, is the cabinet which will show him to us. But why inside a crystal globe? Couldn't he present himself outside of it? I asked curiously. We must remember, continued Nicholas, that our emotions can transmit disturbing vibrations. The crystal cabinet is made of insulating material that will protect Richard from our mental energies. And just then, Lysias answered a phone call from communication. It was time for the meeting to begin. It was a 40-minute past midnight. In answer to my questioning look, Nicholas whispered, "Only now is there enough quiet in Richard's new earthly home. The whole house must be in silence and his parents asleep. At this early stage of his life, his spirit is still fairly free, not totally confined to the cradle." Nicholas couldn't continue. Clarence rose and asked for perfect unity of thought and a real fusion of feelings. In the silence that followed, Clarence offered a simple but moving prayer. Then Lysias played beautifully on the flute, filling the room with intense vibrations of peace and enchantment. And when the last melodious strains died away, Clarence spoke again. "Brothers," he said, "let us all send Richard our message of love." I saw Laura's daughters and one granddaughter leave the platform and place themselves near the musical instruments. Lysias followed them. Judith, Yolanda, and Lysias, respectively, approached the piano, harp, and sitar, while Teresa and Heloisa stood by them composing the family choir. I heard melodious sounds, soft in the beginning, which rose gradually to a rapturous and divine harmony. I felt myself carried to sublime spheres of exalted thought, and in a few minutes, why do they do this to me? And in a few minutes, mellifluous voices joined in. It was Lysias and his sisters singing a marvelous song of their own composition. It is difficult for me to put those evocative verses full of spiritual and beautiful into human words. I shall try to reproduce them just to show how beautiful and sublime love is in the spheres of life beyond the shadows of death. Dear Father, when the night at last brings the blessings of sweet rest, remember, kindly Father, well, how much we love and care. While the stars are twinkling, the melody they softly sing, bring your heart with us a while, come to join us in our prayer. Let no trials cause you stress in your brief forgetfulness. Not let suffering bring you sorrow, stay away from evil's pain. Fear no earthly agony, think of our alliance and you'll be strong in the knowledge that tomorrow will bring joy's eternal reign. While you are sleeping in the world, in our emotions now unfurl, in our memories now unfurl, heavenly dawns without compare here in this life above. Look to the future happily, wait for us one day we'll be together once again to share the joys of the garden of your love. Come to us, O Father dear, to the beauty of our sphere. Come again to this our nest, even though you come in dreams, for a while forget the flesh. Come to drink our water fresh, full of hope and tenderness. From the astral shitty streams, our home has not forgotten you, your sacrifices, your kindness too, and the clarity sublime of your lessons on the way. Come across the shadows great, free yourself from matter's weight. Over the mountain you will climb. Come and join us as we pray. As they reached the last words of the song, I noticed that a grayish, milky substance was filling the globe before us. Soon there stood the handsome figure of a middle-aged man. It was Richard. It was difficult for me to describe the sacred emotions of the family as they greeted him. The visitor first addressed himself to his wife and children for a while. Then, casting a friendly look toward us, he requested that we sing the same lovely song once more for him. As he listened to it, was moved to tears. He then turned to us and said, "O my children, how great Jesus' mercy is, for he has crowned our home circle with tonight's supreme joys. In this very room we have together endeavored to find the way to the higher spheres. We have often received the spiritual bread of life here, and now we have gathered here again to receive this sacred incentive. How happy I am." Laura wept discreetly. Lysias and his sister's eyes brimmed with tears. I noticed that the visitor could not speak with ease and apparently had only a short time to stay with us. Probably all the people in the room had a similar impression, because Judith, putting her arms around the crystal globe, exclaimed in loving tones, "Father dear, say what you want us to do. Let us know how we can help your devoted heart." Richard looked lovingly at his wife and said in a low voice, "Your mother will soon come and join me, my child. So will you all, in time. What else could I wish for to make me happy? Let's ask the Master to bless us forever." We were all moved to tears. When the grayish substance began to form in the globe again, I heard Richard exclaim with emotion, "Listen, my children, I have something to ask you from the bottom of my heart. Pray to the Lord that I may never, on earth, have an easy life, so that the light of gratitude and comprehension may keep always bright in my spirit." The unexpected petition touched and surprised me at the same time. Richard said farewell to all while the grayish curtain gradually enveloped the whole globe. And after a few minutes, the globe returned to its ordinary appearance. Minister Clarence closed the ceremony with a prayer, leaving us all with an indescribable feeling of happiness. Our hostess stood on the platform surrounded by her visitors, all anxious to present their congratulations and farewell wishes. As I approached the group to say goodbye to my kind friend and tell her of my deep impression and gratitude, someone touched me lightly on the shoulder. It was Clarence, who said affably, "Listen, Andre, tomorrow I will go with our sister Laura to the physical sphere. If you like, you may come with us to visit your family." I was taken aback, but while my heart leaped with joy, I instantly remembered my work at the chambers. The generous minister, sensing my thoughts, resumed, "You have a fair number of extra service hours to your credit. Therefore, Genesius will easily grant you a 1 week leave of absence after your first year of active collaboration." Overwhelmed with joy, I thanked him, weeping and laughing at the same time. At last, I was going to see my beloved wife and children again. Woo! So that was pretty crazy. So Richard, wow. So Richard is a real hell of a dude. To again another one of these kind of humble, very highly evolved people. This was a man who apparently is a medium. Um, he was either in a dream state, or he was actively doing this with his mediumship abilities. Either way, what we saw in this chapter was the reincarnated version of her husband, who was a child at that time, and either that child went to sleep and was dreaming and was able to project his spirit into the crystal globe, or he was not dreaming, he was awake and was just simply, you know, doing his mediumship, either consciously or unconsciously doing his mediumship and was able to communicate. Either way, the spirit that was doing the talking in the crystal globe was the husband, not the child, not the reincarnated version of himself. So I want to kind of make that clear, because um, it was definitely two different things that we were talking about, right? But what makes him such a swell guy is that, he basically prayed for to not have an easy life. His whole mental was all about staying in gratitude, staying in appreciation, staying in a state of thankfulness for life and for the blessings of life. And in his mind, in order to do that, um, living a hard life, living a life of suffering will offer many, many, many opportunities to stay thankful and to be in a gracious state of mind. Um, which, when you think about that, it's like, well, that sounds almost counterintuitive, but it isn't. Because what we're talking about here is your mindset. Spiritism really, yeah, we talk about spirits. We do. We spend a lot of time talking about our mediumship, talking about our spirits. And we also spend a lot of time talking about our healing practices. But what we don't spend a lot of time talking about is our internal work, the work that we have to do, and the whole reason why we work with spirits in the first place. People tend to sort of brush that under the rug, and this is one of those perfect instances where we are being shown that our mindset is the key to our spiritual growth. And in a world where suffering is inevitable, when someone prays for more suffering on top of the inevitable suffering, what they are saying essentially is present to me opportunities to be grateful. And in those presentations, they will come as hardships. Those hardships are not It's not evil, it's not bad luck, it's not a bitter, hard, horrible life. They're just opportunities, they're just lessons. And it's up to you, the receiving end, to change your mindset to see it that way. If these hardships are presented to you, if these opportunities of suffering are presented to you, and you decide to allow it to consume you, to start sulking, getting depressed, getting negative, being judgmental, complaining, when you start to fall into those things, then yeah, it is suffering. It is suffering. It is awful. Um, it will be a difficult life for you. But if you are presented with these things and instead you approach these things with grace, with gratitude, with curiosity, with a sense of, exploration and wanting to learn a lesson in order to grow, then you are approaching it with the right mindset. And that's the mindset that will, quote unquote, give you the moral brownie points. That's, in a nutshell, what he's trying to say. Wallowing in the mud. Exactly. Exactly. Let me see. Do we have time for this chapter? Yeah. Yeah, it's a short chapter. All right, let's do it. Chapter 49, Returning Home. Like a child led by his benefactors, I arrived in my hometown with the indescribable sensation of a traveler returning home after a long absence. The countryside hadn't changed noticeably, and the neighborhood's old trees were still there, as were the sea and the sky and the same indefinite scent. Full of excitement and joy, I no longer noticed Laura's anxious and preoccupied expression. I took my leave of the small caravan which went on ahead, and Clarence embraced me and said, "You have a whole week at your disposal. I'll come to see you daily, since I have to return regularly to take care of some problems regarding Laura's reincarnation. If you wish to return to the astral city, you can do so in my company. Be well, Andre." After a last goodbye to Lysias's devoted mother, I found myself alone, inhaling deeply the air of times past. I didn't waste time examining my surroundings, but quickly made my way through the streets towards my home. My heart beating fast, I approached the large entrance gate. As in the past, the wind whispered softly through the small park. Azaleas and roses bloomed, greeting with the spring. And opposite the front door gracefully rose the palm tree with Zalia and I had planted on our first wedding anniversary. Intoxicated with joy, I entered the house. I noticed that it was greatly changed. Where was the old Jaraconda? Jacaranda? Wood furniture, and the large picture of our family where Zalia, myself, and the children had formed such a gracious group. What had happened? Afflicted and anxious, I began to stagger with emotion. I went into the living room where I saw my youngest daughter, now quite a young lady. Almost at the same moment, Zalia came out of our bedroom with a gentleman who, at first sight, appeared to be a doctor. I shouted my joy with the full strength of my lungs, but the words echoed through the house unheeded. Suddenly, I understood the situation, and disappointed, I fell silent. I held Zalia in my arms with all the tenderness I had held for so long, but she seemed absolutely insensitive to my caresses. Looking extremely anxious, she asked the gentleman something I could not quite catch. Lowering his voice, he answered, "I won't be able to make sure diagnosis until tomorrow. The pneumonia is presenting serious complications, owing to his high blood pressure. Dr. Ernest will need the utmost care and absolute rest." Who could Dr. Ernest be? I was lost in a sea of questions until I heard my wife plead in anguished tones. "Oh, doctor, for the Lord's sake, save him. I couldn't bear a second widowhood." Zalia wept and wrung her hands, showing acute nervous distress. A thunderbolt couldn't have struck me with greater violence. Another man had taken possession of my home, and my wife had forgotten me? The house was no longer mine. Had it been worthwhile to wait so long to be met with such disillusionment? I ran to my room only to find the spacious chamber completely changed. On the bed lay a middle-aged man, clearly in a poor state of health. Three dark entities walked to and fro beside him, doing their utmost to aggravate his sufferings. My first instinct was to despise the intruder with all of my strength, but I was no longer the same man. The Lord had summoned me to the practice of his doctrine of brotherly love and forgiveness, and although I knew he was surrounded by inferior entities devoted to evil, I wasn't able to help him immediately. I sat down, bewildered and disappointment, watching Zelia walk in and out of the room several times, caressing the patient with the loving tenderness that had been all mine. And after a few hours of bitter observation and meditation, I returned to the living room where my two daughters sat talking. New surprises followed. The elder had married and carried a little baby in her arms. But what about my son? Where could he be? After giving the necessary instructions to an old nurse, Celia, apparently calmer, joined the girls. "I came to see you today, mother," said my eldest child, "not only to pay dear Ernest a little visit, but also because all morning the thought of father hasn't left my mind, and my heart seems to feel his presence. It's a feeling I can't define." She couldn't finish, and her eyes filled with tears. To my great surprise, Zalia answered her with a sharp authority. "Nonsense! This is the last straw. Worried as I am, I still have to put up with your silly attitudes? You must control that old-fashioned sentimentality, my child. I have strictly forbidden any mention to your father in this house. Don't you know how it annoys Ernest? I sold everything that reminded me of the dead past, even had the wall redecorated. Can't you help me with my efforts?" Since my sister became involved with this darn spiritism, the younger girl added, "She has kept her head full of nonsense. Such foolishness. The idea of the dead coming back is the height of absurdity." "I am not expressing religious convictions," she answered, still crying. "It is a crime to remember and miss our father. Don't you have any love in your hearts? Have you no feeling? If father were here, mother, his only son would be out acting so crazily. Nonsense, Zalia retorted irritably. Each of us must follow the fate assigned by God. Andre is dead. Remember that, and please stop lamenting the irremediable past. I approached my weeping child and dried her tears, murmuring words of comfort and encouragement, which she registered subjectively as consoling thoughts. Well, now, here was I in quite an unexpected situation. I finally understood why my friends had for so long delayed my visit to my earthly home. Sorrows and disappointments followed in rapid succession. I felt as if my home had been transformed by burglars and ruined by voracious worms. Belongings, positions, affections, nothing was left but the faithful heart of one daughter. All the long years of suffering and torment in the dark regions beyond the tomb, even the bewildering agony of the first days after death, had not made me shed such heartbreaking tears. The night came and went, and a new day dawned, finding me in the same perplexing condition, hearing words and witnessing attitudes I could never have imagined. In the evening, Clarence came to see me as he promised. Seeing how desperate I was, he tried to comfort me with friendly and wise words. I understand your sorrow, but I can't help rejoicing at the splendid opportunity. I have no new instructions for you, as any advice now would be inappropriate or inopportune. However, my dear friend, I can't forget the recommendations of Jesus to love God above all things and our neighbor as ourselves. This, when followed, works real miracles of happiness and understanding in our lives. I thanked him with emotion and asked for his continued support. Clarence smiled and left. Then, facing bitter reality, absolutely alone in this hour of trial, I began to meditate on the meaning of the gospel's command. Gradually, my thoughts became calmer. After all, why condemn Zalia's actions? Had I been the spouse left alone on earth, would I, perhaps, have borne the prolonged solitude? Wouldn't I have found 1,000 excuses to justify a second marriage? And why hate the poor sick man? Wasn't he also my brother in the house of our Lord? Our home might be in even worse conditions if Zalia hadn't accepted his support. It was necessary for me to fight and conquer my ruthless selfishness. Jesus had led me to new sources of enlightenment, and I could no longer act as a simple man on earth. My family no longer consisted of only a wife and 3 children, but was made up of hundreds of patients in the chamber of rectification. It expanded to include the whole universal community. As I gave myself up to this new trend of thoughts, I felt that true love was beginning to flow from the blessed wounds which had been inflicted on my heart. Whew! Wow. So this is this is a little bit, just a smidge of reminiscent of the story of Tobias and his 2 wives. You know, that little polyamorous little situation. Um, because Tobias died after his first wife, and his first wife had to witness him get remarried and fall in love with another woman, and in that observation, she had to come to terms with a lot of things, and when she did, she was then able to be of even more service. She was able then to help both him and his new wife. And then when they crossed over, she was there to receive the both of them, and a new type of loving relationship occurred because of it. And we're seeing a little bit of that sort of recognition, that a little bit of that replay happening, where Andre is seeing his wife having been remarried, and he now has to kind of come to terms with these ideas of brotherly love, universal love, family love, as opposed to possession, right? Because if you notice the language he was using, it was like, that is my wife. Those are my kisses that she's offering. Those are the caresses and the touches that was only reserved for me, right? He went from that kind of language to, you know, why can't I just understand where she's coming from? Why do I have to blame her? Why do I have to blame him? And like those are revelations that help us to evolve, right? So we'll call it a night. We're going to be on chapter 50 next week. And in the meantime, you know, the platform is now open to questions if we have any. Let me know how you guys feel. Where is the remote control? I literally just had it. Okay. I guess not. Oh, there it is. All right. Any questions about these chapters? It really is, Lavetta. It really is. And the Allan Kardec books were a little bit more they were a little bit more meatier in terms of like trying to explain concepts, philosophy, science, things like that. So it was a little bit more, you know, tedious. But this book is written in a much more, it's like kind of like watching a movie. It's written a lot more it's user friendly, the characters are relatable. And so the messages are much more profound in that sense, because you can see them being put into practice among people, real situations. So it makes it that much better. So I would agree. It's a very transformational book. I would agree. So yeah, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight. Make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. Make sure you head over to my website and join my newsletter. Make sure you head over to my Patreon and join that. My Patreon is going to be getting some extra love and attention next week. I'm really, really excited to upload a couple of fun pieces of content for January. So be ready for that. And yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Have a beautiful night. And of course, as always, remember, this is how we grow. Good night, everybody. See you next week.